Hi everyone and welcome to Creative Cakes by Sharon. Today I'm creating Kristoff from the Disney movie Frozen. After creating my tutorials on Elsa, Anna, Olaf, Elsa's Castle and the sisters together, I've had many requests to create Kristoff, so this one's for you. Guys, if you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to my channel so that you'll be able to see all my creative cake tutorials as I release them. Today I've got my Kristoff template and you can get a copy of this in the description box below. I've got a 6 by 8 inch cake and I've got 3 layers here. I've got my fondant roller, a pair of scissors, a sharp knife, an edible marker, my X-Acto blade, a palette knife and my offset spatula. I've also got some white chocolate ganache and some chocolate frosting. I've got a little bit of water and a paintbrush. I've got some skin colour fondant, some grey and light yellow fondant, a little bit of light brown, dark brown and some white fondant. I've got a small round cutter as well as a Wilton tip number 233. I've got some petal dust here. I've got a light pink, a brown and a cream colour, as well as some fluffy brushes. I've also got a piece of textured paper towel and of course my board. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is stack my cake using a nice thick layer of this chocolate buttercream frosting in between each layer. Now I've got my template on top of the cake and I'm just going to fold over Kristoff's ear and the top of his beanie because I'm not going to cut these out of the cake, and then using my sharp knife and holding it nice and vertical, I'm going to cut all the way around the template and remove all of the excess. Now Kristoff has quite a round face at the bottom, and instead of having a sharp edge to the cake, I'm just going to take off the very slightest amount of cake at the very edge around the chin area, and also at the bottom of the cake I'm just going to cut in a little bit to make it a bit more rounded. Using my white chocolate ganache now, I'm going to cover the entire cake, the tops and the sides. It's essentially a crumb coat, but while I'm working I try to get it as smooth as I can. And once I've got a nice covering, I'm going to put it in the fridge for about 15 minutes to set. Now here I've taken the cake out of the fridge and it's firm to the touch, and I'm going to smooth over the entire cake, and using some boiling water and my offset spatula, I'm going to heat up the spatula in the water and wipe off any excess in my paper towel and then smooth it over the ganache surface. The cake's now ready to decorate, and before I start I'm going to create some raised features for Kristoff, such as his ears, his nose, his cheeks and his lips. So starting with the nose, I've got a nice big piece of fondant and I'm going to use the template as a guide to shape it into his nose. I also need to create his ear and his chin, which is quite prominent. Once I've done both of his cheeks, I'm going to roll 2 pieces of fondant fairly thinly to create his lips. Now I'm going to place these pieces of fondant on the cake, and of course his chin goes right at the very bottom of the cake, but to get the right positioning for the cheeks and the nose and the lips, I'm just going to place a template on top of my cake and create a little indentation through the paper and use that as a guide on where to stick the fondant pieces. For his ear, it simply sticks to the side of the cake. And before I roll out my fondant to cover the face, I'm just going to spend a few moments to make sure that all of these features are nice and smooth and exactly the way I want them. So here I have my rolled out piece of skin coloured fondant, and I'm going to place my template on top of the fondant and cut around his face, leaving about 2 to 3 inches to make sure I've got enough fondant to go down the sides of the cake. And then I'm going to carefully roll the fondant onto my roller, and using the template as a guide, I'm just going to make a little mark at the top of his hat because I know that I don't need to cover the whole cake with this fondant, just from his forehead down, and then just gently drape the fondant over the cake. Now I need to smooth out the fondant down the sides and then carefully working in between all of the features on the top of the cake, and then trim off all the excess. To create Kristoff's top and bottom lip, I'm going to use the back of my paintbrush to press the fondant very gently in between the 2 pieces of fondant that I laid underneath. I'm just pressing gradually, and I'm going to use my finger to press up against the fondant and the paintbrush to define his top and bottom lip. I also need to add a little bit of definition to his ears, so I'm going to use the back of my paintbrush for this as well. I'm going to start work on Kristoff's eyes now, so I need to cut them out of the template, and I've rolled out some white fondant here which I'm going to cut the whites of his eyes from. Using some of the brown fondant now, I've just cut out the brown sections of his eye using my round cutter, and once I've stuck them onto the whites of his eyes, I'm going to use my template on the cake as a guide to make a little mark where I need to position the eyes, and then stick them onto the cake. Using my black edible marker now, I'm going to colour in a little circle for the pupils of Kristoff's eyes. I'm going to work on his eyelids now, so I need to cut them out of the template, and using the same skin coloured fondant, I need to cut his two eyelids out and stick them over the top part of the white sections of his eyes. Once I've put the eyelids in place, I just need to make sure that I smooth down the top of the eyelid so it covers any of the white section of his eyes. To finish off Kristoff's eye opening, I've rolled out a tiny little snake using the skin coloured fondant and just placed it at the very bottom of the white of his eyes. And to give the appearance of eyelashes, I've rolled out a little tiny snake of brown fondant and attached it to the bottom of his top eyelid. To bring out his eyes a little bit further, I'm using my black edible marker to outline the browns and whites of his eyes. On the template, it's a little hard to see Kristoff's eyebrows because they're covered by his fringe, but nevertheless, I'm still going to create the eyebrows, and I'm just rolling out some dark brown fondant and using the template as a guide to shape them and then positioning them onto the cake. For Kristoff's hair, I've rolled out some of my light yellow fondant, and I'm going to cut some wavy shapes out to resemble his fringe. Once I've cut quite a few yellow streaks of hair out, I'm going to place them on a piece of brown fondant which I've rolled out and then cut around them again. I'm only going to create a few of these just so that there are some different shades in his hair. Now before I start adding the hair to his head, I'm going to use the back of my paintbrush to create a few streaks in each of the pieces of fondant. And then it's just a matter of assembling the hair and layering it as you go along. And don't forget to work down the side of his head and behind his ear as well. Kristoff's beanie or cap is fairly easy to create. On some grey fondant, I've cut it out using the template as a guide and leaving plenty on the edges to cover the front and back of the cake. And I'm just going to drape it over the top of his hair, smooth it down the back and trim off all the excess. At this point, I'm going to transfer my cake onto my board, and using my piece of paper towel now, I'm going to use a little bit of firm pressure and press into the fondant for his cap. This is going to give a little bit of a textured woolly appearance. I've also added some trim to the edge of his hat by rolling out a long snake of fondant and attaching that to the very edge, as well as the little pom-pom at the top of the beanie. I've just created that rolling out a ball of fondant and sticking it to the top of his cap. Now using my Wilton tip, I'm going to texture the pom-pom and the trim by just pressing it gently into the fondant. And finally, I've got my 3 shades of petal dust here. I'm going to use the pink to emphasize his lips and his cheeks, and the brown and the cream to add a few more tones to his hair. And here he is, guys, a Kristoff cake for you. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, don't forget to give it a like and share it with your friends. I love hearing from you, so if you have any suggestions, drop me a line in the comment section below. Make sure you subscribe to my channel for more creative cake tutorials, and as always, thanks for watching.